This panel topic is Tech for Impact, which is maybe both a basic but really important question. Are the investments we're making in technology and technology innovation resulting in real and material and healthy, sustainable impact? But I want to recognize an organization that I think is delivering tech for impact in a different kind of way, and that's the Monetary Authority of Singapore. I think the people, the organization, that organization, Enterprise Singapore, the country of Singapore, that all the people involved with making this FinTech festival happen every year are having an impact. And they really, in my mind, are setting the bar for what every nation state should be doing today, which is facilitating, collaborating, networking, to enable the collective to end up producing more and better for the collective. The other thing I want to sort of acknowledge is this is my anniversary. So a year ago, I stood on this stage and delivered a talk titled "Technology is Dead." And the gist of my talk was twofold. If you want to be successful with technology innovation in the short term, spend less time writing the code and more time decoding humans. At the end of the day, this is not about technology, this is about humanity. And I think the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned that. The second part of the talk, which is really what we want to dig into today, is how do we ensure that the innovations that we're creating result in a healthier planet, result in sustainable collective good? How do we ensure that we mitigate the negative unintended consequences? And I think as humans, as citizens of the world, we all have felt some of the negative unintended consequences of this stuff. And then the last thing I'll say really as a setup to the discussion, is I've been thinking a lot about the state of the world, and particularly a year later, right? My anniversary, and what's changed. And I sort of arrived at this view that one of the things that's changed, which is not necessarily for the good, is we live in a world of massive contradictions. That on the one hand, we have access to infinite information. And on the other hand, there's a desperate search for the truth, or at least in America, that's true. On the one hand, climate change is now being talked about. Like a year ago, not so much. And a year later, oh my God. But it's not much is being done about it, particularly at a very sort of individual level. And on the one hand, there's never been more wealth in the world, and on the other hand, this inequality thing is still a massive issue. And we heard Queen Maxima talk about, what's great is that, there are fewer unbanked, but what's not so great is that the accounts are dormant. So we still have a massive problem to solve there. And then the last sort of contradiction, I think, is really what we want to dig into is, on the one hand, we appear to be more together as a planet, and yet on the other hand, there seems to be even more division than maybe there's ever been. And so how do we reconcile those contradictions? And most importantly, how do we look at technology innovation and ensure, again, that the outcome is a net positive outcome, a healthy outcome for, not just for our generation, but for future generations to come. So I'd love to throw it over to the panel and Professor, start with you and just get your 2 or 3 minute reaction to the question.
Well, we speak about innovation and technology. The first thing I would like to emphasize, and it may answer your last question, is that no doubt the dominant technology of our time is computer technology with many applications. It was the first computer ever came to the world some 70 years ago, which is 2 generations in human life, more or less. But in computer technology, 1 generation is a year, 2 years, something like this. And there is a huge discrepancy between the two. And this creates most of the problems that you mentioned. We solve many problems by using computer technology. But we tend to forget that although the solutions are technological, the problems are not. The problems are usually concern human beings. I give you one small example. Everyone is talking about smart cities. That is, finding the right technologies to make our life more efficient, better, etc. we tend to forget that a smart city is also a city. I mean, a place in which people should live together, many social problems, psychological problems, legal issues, and things like this. The second thing that we tend to forget is that without any intention, while developing those new technologies, we create a weak point because we become dependent on these technologies. And bad guys, and there are many types of bad guys, starting with criminal and then going to all the way up to hostile states and things like this. Bad guys may use this dependence not for the benefit of society. This was the reason why we developed all this technology, but for their own benefit. And therefore we should take care, even at the design stage, we should take care of these issues before we start applying it widely. The most known example is cybersecurity, which is the dark side of computer technology. It's like the old Chinese yang and yin. There is no bright side without a dark side. You should think about all of them. And my last point in this very short introduction is that people think that they may solve those problems that I mentioned by regulation and things like this. So I share the view that we should think about it before we start doing something. We should put them explicitly on the table when we start developing new technology, but we should find the right balance between this and innovation. Because if you ask too many questions before you start innovating and developing, you may kill the whole drive for innovation. I think this is for introduction.
So let me just have a quick follow-on, and then we'll move over to Vincent. So you mentioned sort of we tend to forget things, like kind of important things. In your work, have you found mechanisms or ways to encourage or not ensure that people don't forget these important things? You know, like from a methodology standpoint, like is there a lesson in there that the audience can take back to apply to their innovation efforts?
Well, at a certain stage, you can have methodologies to do it. Mostly, it's not possible all the time. The obvious example is the AI, which was mentioned here today by BPM Hang. AI, I mean, once the machine can change its own algorithms due to the experience that it gathers, you cannot really predict, in principle, what will be all the results of decisions taken by machines, like human beings. I mean, I have kids. I cannot really predict what they will do in their life.
Right.
So it's not always possible. Usually, what you should do is to raise the awareness. Awareness not only of the developers, but also the public and other communities. This is what we do when we try to deal with issues like this in human life.
Yeah. Vincent, what's your take?
Well, I think your question is how do we resolve some of these contradictions? How do we build bridges and leverage on technology innovation to make the world a better place for humanity? I don't think, first of all, we can address and resolve all the questions, all the issues in their entirety, but I think there are things that we can do to assuage and mitigate some of the concerns, and some of which Professor has discussed. Technology is neutral. On its own, it does not do good, neither does it do bad. So I totally agree with you that technology is dead, and the only time it comes alive is when it gets connected to a human. So we need to collectively steer technology towards doing good, towards building a better world, making lives better. And as a member of the corporate world, perhaps I can share a couple of perspectives on what corporates can do to help. First off, I think corporates could define their purpose clearly and build in it the objective to improve lives, make the world a better place to live using technology and innovation, and that will drive employee behaviors. Corporate purpose, and incorporate in it the desire to do good. And if I may humbly use the examples that my company are involved in, where we're SD Engineering, we leverage on technology and engineering to solve real-world problems, make lives better, and in the same time mitigate some of the negative impacts that urbanization causes to climate. Doing our part for sustainability, for example, we develop smart transport systems, be it for rail, road, or buses, to make traffic congestion lesser of a problem. And that by itself will reduce fuel burn, improve fuel efficiency, mitigating somewhat the impact of vehicle emissions on the environment. And then making public transportation more efficient and more reliable by using, for example, predictive maintenance and intelligent algorithms to increase uptime, moving people away from using cars as a mode of transportation and then going to mass transport system as a means of transportation. And the net overall impact on vehicle emissions would have to come down. We also have smart lighting solutions to reduce energy use, and the examples go on and on. And that's our corporate purpose. We use engineering and technology solutions to improve lives, and in this particular case, mitigate the impact of urbanization on the environment. And we can do so while still being profitable, having a sustainable, long-term, sustainable business results. So all this can be consistently done. So I believe that corporates do have the opportunity to define their purpose, and in there, include in it the desire to do good, improve the world, leveraging technology, and every little bit counts. So that's my first thing, your corporate purpose, and how do we incorporate in it things to the objective to do good. Second piece is, in today's world, the problems are very complex in nature, and the solutions by necessity are also very complex. It's very difficult for any one organization to take on all the challenges by themselves, be it environmental challenges or climate change challenges, urban sustainable solution challenges. So collaboration is key. Collaboration at all different levels, corporate to corporate, corporate to government, across geographic boundaries. It is with collective wisdom that we can come out with the best solution, because innovation doesn't happen in silos. So we've got to harness that. In fact, in today's interconnected world, there's a great opportunity for us to put teams of smart people together to crack those issues and the problems. It's almost like the ability to put together teams of modern-day Thomas Edisons to solve the toughest problems that we are facing today. And given what you mentioned, the rise of nationalism, protectionism, we need more examples, good examples of collaboration to mitigate those concerns. And in so doing, I think it's important for organizations to look at common interess, understand common ground, and address common concerns. And sometimes it requires us to leap forward for collective good, to build trust for future success. Yeah. So collaboration, I think, is the second point I'd like to raise.
I mean, two quick reactions to that. One is, I just read a book titled Rebel Ideas by a guy named Matthew Sire, I believe. And the gist of the book is, to solve complicated problems, you don't need the smartest people, you need diversity, you need complex perspectives, you need a diversity of perspectives. Functional, behavioral, technical, cultural. The problems have sort of out-complicated the natural way we've approached problems. The problem with that is that our bias is to assemble teams that look like us. Right? And so we want to break that. We have to change the way we think about how we do it. So Robin, What's your take?
So first of all, I'd say technology is just a tool, right? So technology can get blamed or technology can get congratulated. So if we look at the company I founded on, we've got medical devices saving lives, but people online proliferating false information. So mankind, we're Homo sapiens, and my basic thinking, first of all, let's start by we could be working in an academic community, we could be working in business, or we could be working in government. And to me, these are three domains working at different paces with different objectives. I think the biggest opportunity for the world is connected. So there's a disaster somewhere in Vietnam, it's not covered up, you hear about it. That's the positive side. The basic problem we have with our political history is all the rules and regulations written a couple of hundred years ago, so they're a few hundred years out of date and not fit for purpose. What I think we can do as technologists and entrepreneurs, we can try and do our best with the tools we have available. So the company I founded on is doing a project with UNICEF. The other thing that I'm very aware of is global difference, cultural difference. If a Japanese says yes, he means I hear what you say, and if an American says yes, he means I agree with you. So understanding these differences. So I think we need to understand human beings, right? We're all connected, we're all joined up. And I think within our communities, we're all communicating through the internet and we have friends across the planet. One of my hobbies is bird watching. The community of bird watchers is observing bird migration and seeing what's happening to the planet. So there's a lot of positive things that are happening. What I feel is the problem we have right now is that most people have not seen the benefits of globalization and technological change. I suspect everybody in this room has seen the benefit. So I think we need to understand the problems, and I think we need to be joined up. And basically, I think understanding is the key. So education, how many people really understands that in your iPhone there's a few billion transistors, and there's software on top of that, and there's an operating system. So we have some huge new problems, like security is the biggest question, I think. Assume that nothing is secure is probably a good start. So I think all we can do, conferences like this help. I think Singapore, in terms of government, academia, and business joined up, is probably an example to the world. And I think if we look back at the history of mankind, we go through peak to famine problems. We have some new problems and we have some new opportunities, and I think the best thing we can do, one of the things I said when we were creating a global architecture, I said one of our objectives was to turn our enemies into our friends, right? So companies like Intel license the ARM architecture. So I think collaboration is the only future for humanity. If we don't have collaboration, the human species won't exist. We've got different organizations, charities, entrepreneurial groups, and so on. We need to get more joined up. I'm still, the good news is life expectancy has gone up, starvation is less, there are less wars, but there's more media and there's more hype. So I think if we're taking a high-level view, we're still moving in the right direction, but because of complexity, there's a lot more work to be done, and particularly with machine learning. But just one other thing I'd like to add, because I started life as an analog engineer. We as human beings, we have sight, we have smell, we have 7 senses, right? Computers are good at doing things faster. That's what they're really good at. But I don't think the machine takes over the human being. What we have to do, though, is recognize all those dangers. So certainly we need better ethics. Certainly we need better laws, and we need to be more joined up. And all the things I'm doing, there's quite a lot of positive things happening in spite of the political uncertainty and the media frenzy.
So let me just extend that and come back to something Vincent said, which is, we sit here today and say, listen, the way to ensure that innovation is more successful, short-term and long-term, better for the planet, whatever, is in part through collaboration, in part through a more humanistic approach. But we actually aren't very good at that. It's actually not our natural bias. So my question is, how do you solve that? And then the second part is more macro, which you and I were talking about earlier, is do the sort of cross-country mechanisms that exist today, including governing structures, sort of actually foster real collaboration? Or we were saying, like, some of these mechanisms are 200, 300, 400 years old, and we're living in a very different world. So it's like macro systems stuff and micro human stuff. Like, how do we begin to deal with that?
So my starting point is we look for the things that work, right? So collaborative R&D works, right? Because you need the best people across the planet. So if you look at the innovation of the internet or so on. So basically what I think is it's like everything in life. It's not all good or all bad. There's some good things happening and there's some terrible things happening. So my personal experience is you focus on the good and you try and make it better, because you cannot solve, you know, the world's problems. You cannot stop the tide coming in. So I think we need a bit of pragmatism and realism. And one of the problems, again, with this internet world, and just looking at all the buzzwords that I see behind me, no disrespect to anybody, but all these buzzwords are really hype. I think we have to look at what's really going on. The other thing, as human beings, we have music, we have art, we have nature. So I think there's a bit of a technology frenzy, which I sometimes shudder when I see everybody using their iPhones and not talking to each other. Oh dear, I cause that problem. So I think a bit of pragmatism is what is needed.
So I think I agree with Sir Robin. In fact, you're finding this understanding cultural differences is important, and nuances. We need to understand what are the common grounds and build on that for collaboration. I live in Japan. I understand perfectly what Sir Robin said. So this language barrier, sometimes we got to really try to understand each other's focus and priorities, build on common grounds and move forward. And sometimes you got to find what is the underlying objectives across the ecosystem that you're trying to collaborate with. A few years ago, there was a consortium of companies that was formed to tackle sustainability challenges, and that includes companies like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Unilever, P&G, Procter & Gamble, who are rivals in business, but they were coming together to solve issues like sustainable refrigeration. Now that was the common interest that brought these companies together. And more recently, BMW and Daimler, competitors in their respective fields, came together and said, we're going to develop autonomous vehicles together. Now that's, I think earlier on I mentioned leaning forward. Sometimes you may not know whether the benefits are symmetric, but we've got to do it with a little bit of trust. And I want to go back to the point that you made just now. When we talk about collaboration, it has to have a diverse resources and different expertise. Otherwise, we risk, just finding people who look like us and coming up with solutions that we like. So the diversity of views is important. So again, I go back to finding the common interests that we can build upon.
Yeah. Professor, you mentioned. Go ahead.
Well, it's agreed here that these are complex problems. Okay. So first step is to understand the problem. Many times we really don't understand the problem. I can take the example of the internet. The internet was developed by DARPA in the US to make the network less vulnerable than other means of communication. Not to do what we use it for today, and that is enabling people to talk freely all the time and things like this. It was invented in order to make the network, given that some nodes would be attacked, function despite this, and it was not, in principle, you cannot predict at the end of the day what will be done with this technology or that technology. One partial solution is to work in, like we do, for example, in our research center at Tel Aviv University. We work in teams which include not only scientists, computer scientists, mathematicians, engineers, etc., but also a typical team will include someone from the social science, someone from the business school, law, school of law, which is very important because many problems are. And sometimes you can, once you understand the problem, sometimes you can develop the right technology, sometimes you should find other ways, not technological at all. I'll give you one example, okay? One of the problems that we all are aware of is sharing information, especially if you speak about AI. You need many databases, you need to share them in order to build effective algorithms and effective machines. Sharing information is against human nature. It's not against technology. Okay?
Right.
And this is, you should understand it. Now, once you understand it, you can find sometimes technologies that will enable you sharing information without, for example, this homomorphic encryption, in which I can take your data and your data, each one of you will encrypt his own data, not giving me the key. I mean, I will never know what is really inside there, and still I can make computation on those data sets without knowing exactly I'm doing it on the encrypted data. This is a technology that may ease, in a way, the problem of technology sharing. Sometimes it is not enough. A very simple example that I can give you, that when I founded in Israel, I mean, there is a huge problem between, if we speak about the internet and things like this, there's a huge tension between security on one hand, which we all want, and privacy, which we also all want, okay? And some of the problems could be solved by technology, for example, using machine learning, artificial intelligence, to detect bits that carry malware without going to the level of the content, without decoding